Hi, I'm Larry Johnson. I am a professor here at Texas A&M University, and we're going to talk about the female reproductive system. We want to talk about the ovary, their features and functions. We want to talk about the follicular types of types of follicles, development, ovulation, and atresia of follicles.
Look more at the ovary, we see that these small cells here are primordial follicles. So you have to know the different follicular development. You get primordial, and then you get primary follicles. And the primary ones, as we'll see, has cuboidal cells, one layer or multiple layers, and then when it has a cavity inside there, it's a secondary follicle. And then that's the beginning of the antral follicle, the Graafian follicle that has different structures there around the egg. So here's the egg all the way, and then finally ovulation of the egg. Some of the cells of the granulosa cells come out with the egg. And then when that regresses, it gives you corpus luteum, and then the corpus albicans when that regresses. So here we see on the ovary, the outside we see the germinal epithelium that we see there, and we see tunica albicans, the connective tissue inside, and then we see some eggs that are surrounded by squamous cells, and those are the primordial follicles. And then the primary follicles, the cells are no longer flattened, they're cubed, and you may have one layer or you may have multiple layers for the primary follicle. Here again we can see the primordial follicles. Here the primary have the cube cells as opposed to flattened cells in the primordial. Here we see the oocyte, and then we see follicular cells around it, tunica albicans, germinal epithelium, and then here's a theca the different layers of the theca. This is germinal. This is the stratum granulosa that we see inside there, and those are the same cells as we see right here. The cube cells are the same. When they differentiate, the increase in size and produce the fluid that's inside there that we'll see as we go along. So if we look at these cells in more detail, these are actually follicles, and there's an oocyte, and here we see the oocyte inside there. This is a cytoplasm. That's the nucleus that we see. So this is cytoplasm all the way here, and then these are the follicular cells. Follicular cells and then the stroma cells on the outside. So whenever these granulosa cells are flattened, it is primordial. Whenever they become cubed and multiple layers, but still no antrium, they become a primary. So the primary, and also you see the zona pellucida, very plain in there. You can see the zona pellucida right around the egg that you see. And the granulosa cells are surrounding the zona pellucida, and the egg is on the inside of the zona pellucida. And then you get the theca interna, so you get some connective tissue modification there. And then when you get to a more mature follicle, you got an antrium, cavity, still have the egg, and then you have the theca interna and the theca externa. So the theca externa is another layer of modified connective tissue around it. Theca is both of them is connective tissue modified during the process. And here we can see the theca externa, theca interna, and then this is the liquid that we have there. And inside there, we would have the egg. We don't see it in this particular view, but there's the egg inside. There's this nucleus. You got the corona radiata, or the cells that are around it. Cumulus oophrus is a little heel that connects the egg to the granulosa cells. This is membrane granulosa, theca interna, theca externa, located there. If we look at this one, we can see the oocyte. We can see the zona pellucida in through there. You can see the cumulus oophrus, corona radiata, granulosa follicular cells in through there, theca interna, theca externa, and here we see tunica albicans, primordial follicles, several primary follicles, and this is a tertiary follicle when it's just about ready to ovulate. This is the corpus luteum over here that we can see. Let's see, you can see it right there, and also see here. And the theca interna becomes the granulosa theca lutein cells. Lutein cells. No, the granulosa lutein cells are the granulosa cells that becomes part of the main part of the corpus luteum that we'll see later on. But the theca interna cells also become a theca luteum, which are the smaller cells that we'll talk about here in a minute. But right now, we have stroma in through there, which is connective tissue, and you have the oocyte. There's this nucleus, cytoplasm is out through there, and you have the primordial and the primary follicles that we can see there. This will be a tertiary follicle out through there. If we look at one of those primaries, you see cube cells, zona pellucida, and this is the oocyte, cytoplasm of the oocyte that you see there. And then we see some fibroblastic-like cells here that would be theca interna here pretty soon. Now, all cells do not ovulate. All follicles do not ovulate. Some of them, you have a wave of them developing at one time, and only one is chosen as a rule. And the other ones die out. And so they never make to ovulation. And here, whenever you see granulosa lutein cells, granulosa cells from the follicle in the liquid and through there loose like that, that is a sign of atresia. The cells are dying. And whenever it dies, it regresses, it gets smaller, and finally it makes a glassy membrane, and that's what we see there, which is the final product of a treated follicle. Now, corpus albicans is a final product of corpus luteum, as we'll see now. But this is a treated follicle, and most of the follicles in the individual female will undergo atresia. And so if it's not going to undergo an atresia, it develops secondary and then tertiary, and ultimately it ruptures through the germinal epithelium and is ovulated.
We want to acknowledge the original sources of images, drawings, and pictures that might have appeared in this presentation. So this is the original source of those, and we want to acknowledge it. This is the end of the female reproductive system, and this part talking about the ovary features and functions, types of follicles, development, ovulation, and atresia.